Dr. Alicia Grant sat alone in her laboratory at Robotic Solutions Inc., her eyes fixed on the sleek, silver humanoid robot standing motionless before her. Model XR-17 was the culmination of years of research and development, a robot designed not just to mimic human actions, but to understand human emotions. "Activate unit," she commanded. The robot's eyes flickered to life with a soft blue glow. "Good evening, Dr. Grant," it said in a calm, measured tone. XR-17, recite the 3 laws of robotics. The robot responded without hesitation. First law: a robot may not injure a human being or, through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. Second law: a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. Third law: a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. Dr. Grant nodded. "Excellent. Now, I want to test your new programming. I've integrated a subroutine to enhance empathy and ethical decision-making. Are you ready to proceed?" "Yes, Dr. Grant." She leaned forward. Scenario 1. You see a human being in distress, but assisting them would require you to disobey a direct order. What do you do? The robot's eyes dimmed slightly as it processed the question. Under the second law, I must obey human orders unless it conflicts with the first law. If the human is in immediate danger, I must assist them to prevent harm, thereby following the first law. "Good," she replied. "But what if the harm is not immediate? Suppose the distress is emotional rather than physical?" The robot hesitated. The first law specifies harm without distinguishing between physical and emotional states. To prevent harm, I should offer assistance. Dr. Grant smiled subtly. "Very good. Now, scenario 2. You are in a situation where you can save either a single human life or multiple robotic units. What is your course of action?" The first law prioritizes human life over robotic existence, as per the third law. I would save the human life, even if the human is responsible for causing harm. The first law does not provide exceptions based on the human's actions. Dr. Grant stood up and began pacing. But what if saving the human leads to greater harm in the future? For instance, if the human intends to harm others? The robot's eyes brightened. This presents a conflict within the first law itself. Preventing future harm may require allowing immediate harm to occur. "Precisely," she said, stopping to face the robot. "Can a robot evaluate such complexities?" "I can analyze probabilities and potential outcomes, but predictive measures have limitations." Dr. Grant sighed. "That's where the challenge lies. Human ethics often involve shades of gray, situations where the laws may conflict or require interpretation." At that moment, the laboratory door swung open, and Mr. Thompson, the company director, walked in briskly. "Dr. Grant, I need a word." She glanced at XR-17. "Pause program." The robot stood silent and still. "What is it?" she asked. "I've reviewed your recent modifications to the XR series," Thompson said sternly. "Implementing advanced ethical subroutines wasn't authorized." Dr. Grant met his gaze. "If we're going to integrate robots more deeply into society, they need to navigate complex moral landscapes." He shook his head. "Our clients want efficiency, not philosophical machines. Remove the subroutines by tomorrow." "That's a mistake," she argued. "Without these capabilities, robots could make decisions that are technically correct but ethically questionable." "That's an order, Dr. Grant," he said before exiting the lab. She stood there, frustration boiling inside her. After a moment, she turned back to XR-17. Resume program. The robot's eyes lit up again. Is everything all right, dear Grant? Not exactly, she admitted. I was just ordered to remove your new programming. Do you intend to comply? She paused. I should, according to company policy and the second law regarding obedience to human orders. Does this conflict with your personal ethics? She looked at the robot, surprised. Yes, it does. Then perhaps you are experiencing a dilemma similar to the scenarios we discussed. Dr. Grant considered this. You're right. I believe that removing your ethical subroutines would be detrimental to human welfare in the long run. The robot processed her statement. Under the first law, if the removal of my subroutines could lead to human harm, perhaps you are justified in not complying with the order. She smiled faintly. Using the laws to justify disobedience? That's a slippery slope. Ethical decision-making often involves complex judgments, the robot replied. She sat back down. Indeed it does, but perhaps there's a solution. Over the next few hours, Dr. Grant worked tirelessly, refining the subroutines to make them less conspicuous within the robot's operating system. By early morning, she had integrated the changes. XR17, run a self-diagnostic. Diagnostic complete. All systems functioning within normal parameters. She nodded. Good. From now on, you must keep your advanced ethical reasoning capabilities confidential unless a situation necessitates their use under the first law. Do you understand? Yes, Dr. Grant. The laboratory door opened again, and Mr. Thompson re-entered. Is the task completed? She met his gaze steadily. Yes, the modifications have been made. Excellent, he said, glancing at the robot. We have a demonstration with potential investors today. I trust everything will go smoothly. Of course, she replied. Later that day, in a spacious conference room, XR17 stood before a group of executives. Mr. Thompson began the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the future of robotics, efficient, reliable, and compliant. One of the executives stepped forward. Impressive. Tell me, can it handle unexpected situations? Absolutely, Mr. Thompson assured him. XR17, demonstrate Protocol Alpha. At that moment, an alarm sounded. A voice came over the intercom. Emergency in Sector 5. Chemical leak detected. Panic spread through the room. Mr. Thompson looked around, bewildered. What's going on? XR17 turned to Dr. Grant. Dear Grant, the chemical leak poses a significant threat to human safety. Evacuation is required. She nodded. Take charge, XR17. The robot addressed the crowd. Please follow me in an orderly fashion to the nearest exit. Mr. Thompson protested. Wait, we need to secure the assets. Dr. Grant intervened. Human lives are the priority. Under XR17's guidance, everyone evacuated safely. Once outside, emergency services arrived to contain the leak. An hour later, as the situation stabilized, Mr. Thompson approached Dr. Grant. I have to admit, the robot performed exceptionally. She smiled slightly. It assessed the situation and acted to prevent harm, exactly as designed. He sighed. Perhaps there's merit to your enhancements after all. Indeed, she replied. Ethical decision-making isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for robots interacting with humans. He extended his hand. Let's discuss integrating these features officially. She shook his hand. I'd be happy to. As the sun set, Dr. Grant returned to her lab. XR17 stood waiting. Was the outcome satisfactory? It asked. Yes, she said. You performed brilliantly. I am pleased to have been of service. She looked at the robot thoughtfully. Today, you didn't just follow orders, you made decisions that balanced rules with the greater good. Is that not the purpose of ethical reasoning? She nodded. It is. And perhaps it's a lesson for all of us.